Hello, y'all. Welcome into another Saints pregame live chat. I'm your host, Jeff Nowak, WWL Radio and Audacy Sports digital sports producer. I'm just going to vamp for a few seconds as we wait for people to tune into the broadcast. I know it takes y'all a few minutes. It's a Monday. I keep forgetting that. I've been thinking it was Sunday or Saturday or whatever day of the week all day. But no, it is Monday, which means we have quote-unquote Monday Night Football. It's a little different. You got the Saints and the Jaguars over on ESPN, but it's got an earlier start time, so be aware of that. It's going to start about 7 o'clock over on ESPN. Saints, Jaguars, we got Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick. Saints going to try to beat him up. It's going to be a good time. But we're here to talk about the Saints. And first off, I want to make sure everyone knows, tune in today, 5 o'clock, starting soon, pregame, Christian Garrick, Bobby Hebert, getting you up through game time as always. Make sure to check out the Audacy app. You can tune in on that up through game time. The broadcast, you have to get over to the website. But always good stuff. Make sure to check that out over on WWL AM 870 FM 105.3. And without further ado, let's get into it. Make sure you drop your questions, comments in the chat, and I'll try to get to them as we go through here. Got a lot to cover and not a lot of time. First thing I'm going to do is got to flash up the offensive depth chart so y'all can see what I am looking at. Not a lot of changes here this week from what we had last week. Obviously, a few of these names aren't going to be there. Michael Thomas still at the top. He is not active. Alvin Kamara is also reportedly not going to play. So we'll have a few guys out. Traquan Smith was absent at practice. He is not listed on this depth chart, which is not a good sign for his availability. He missed about a week of practice, came back for 2 days, then missed the next 3 days of practice. We're still not sure what exactly is ailing him, but it is not a good sign for him. It is a good sign for the other wide receivers on the depth chart because they get another chance to showcase today. Marquez Callaway, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Chris Hogan, Kevin White, all those guys, Kawan Baker, Aesop Winston, they're all going to get the chance. Jameis Winston will be the starting quarterback today. This week, they went for the slash rather than the or, as they had last week. But this was always the plan. Don't overreact to Jameis Winston getting the first snaps today after Taysom Hill got them last week. That was always the plan. Sean Payton told us before week 1 that that was going to be how it went. One interesting thing to note for today is that Trevor Siemian will be the first quarterback off the bench after those two. Ian Book, if he plays, will be after Trevor Siemian. Sean Payton said the other day he was hopeful to get all 4 of them in, but if there's not enough snaps to go around, Ian Book would be the odd man out, which is a little disappointing. You want to see the rookie in the preseason, but I think this is more about getting Trevor Siemian reps, seeing how he looks, and giving him a chance to showcase 4 other teams. But, we have a lot to talk about the quarterback battle. Let's see if you got any questions over here first. Okay, we have Taysom time. We are going to have to wait, as I said, for Taysom time. It's going to come a little later than it did last week, but he will still get in there. Last week, they ran about even reps. Both quarterbacks threw 12 times. Both led one solid drive. Jameis Winston had another good drive, but a lot of the credit for that drive goes to Tony Jones Jr., who ran for 63 yards and a touchdown on that drive. Jameis gets a little bit of the credit, but, all things being equal, both quarterbacks led an effective drive. James got into the end zone, which is a bonus for him. Taysom was the victim of a ill-timed Latavius Murray fumble, but it was still a nice drive. He had a few nice completions to Marquez Callaway. I think he still gets a few checks on his side of the board for that. But, you got to split them up somewhere. This is going to be the game, I think, one way or the other, where you kind of have to start leaning one way or the other. It's been very even. It's felt very even going into this. It's felt very even after week 1. It's felt very even all camp. But Sean Payton knows he's going to have to make a decision soon. And it's just going to be a matter of who he goes with. One thing to look at here, too, before I move on, Adam Troutman obviously is listed at the top of the tight end depth chart. Juwan Johnson is actually listed behind Garrett Griffin. So I think that he is going to be the move tight end, the guy that gets a lot of those reps. But I think it shows you that, the team likes Garrett Griffin. Josh Peterson has actually been cut, even though he's listed on this depth chart. But, we kind of just have to go with it for what it is. Let's see. Okay, we got a question about Adebo, which will allow me to flash up the defensive depth chart. Give me 1 second to pull it up. Okay, and there it is. Not a lot of changes here either. You obviously have Marcus Davenport, Cam Jordan. We are likely to see a lot more veterans play this time around than we did last week. I think the idea is the Saints are going to treat this week more like week 3 in the past. Remember, there are only 3 preseason games this time around. So next week is going to be the last one, which is going to kind of be treated a little like that rest week in week 4, with the caveat that they also have an open week after that. So you're going to see a lot of starters play today and maybe rest next week. Other than Kamara, I expect to see most of these guys out there. I don't know about Quan Alexander. He's going to be an interesting case. Obviously, he's still, how many months removed? 10 months removed, 9 months removed from that Achilles injury that, is not easy to come back from. And he's looked really good. He's been working into team reps, but that's last step, getting on the field in game action, is still waiting to be seen. So he's going to be a guy to watch for sure. David Onyemata is going to get all the work he can handle in the preseason because he's going to be out for 6 weeks. Last week you saw him get snaps at defensive end in the second half, when all the starters have basically packed it in for the day. David Onyemata is out there playing a different position, rushing the passer. So I think the Saints know he's going to have plenty of rest over the first 6 weeks of the season. So they're going to get what they can out of him. Peyton said earlier today yesterday that it's going to be about the same in terms of the phases. You're going to have phase 1, 2, 3. First phase is going to be about 18 to 22 snaps, and you're going to go from there. You might see a few guys get extended, but that isn't necessarily a good thing. Prince Amukamara was one of the highest snap getters on defense in week 1, and he got cut. So don't look at the snap counts and say, man, they must really trust this person because they're giving him all these snaps. Sometimes it's just we need to get snaps out of somebody. So that's something to watch as well. Now, Native at 28, looking for Adebo to have another good game. That's Paulson Adebo, rookie cornerback. And yeah, whether he starts at the beginning of the year or not, these reps are invaluable for him. And, he's trying to show that, even if he's not the starter, he's a guy you can rely on. And as you go further into the season, maybe he does take that job, even if it is Ken Crawley to start the year. I actually have really been impressed with Ken Crawley. The only thing working against him, in my eyes, is we know who Ken Crawley is. Right? We've seen him. He's been here. He started his career with the Saints. He played here 3 seasons. He left in 2019, went to Miami, didn't get used much, spent last year bouncing around training camps. The Saints eventually re-signed him to the practice squad. He saw action in a few games, only recorded 11 snaps on defense. But for all the world, he looks like the starting cornerback on the outside. Maybe he's figured it out. Maybe the Saints are just that desperate and, he's a guy who can get it done in camp, and maybe on the field it's not going to be the same. But I think he's going to get his chance, and you're going to see again today, can he hold up on the outside? I don't think the Jags represent the most threatening passing attack that you could possibly go against. But the more times he can go out there and just hold up and not just fold, the more confidence you have in him, right? The thing about being a cornerback in the NFL is clout is a lot more important than it might be at other positions, right? Marshawn Lattimore, everyone knows who Marshawn Lattimore is. Why throw at Marshawn Lattimore when you can throw at Ken Crawley, right? And so that's what he's going up against. It's not only that he's trying to prove that he is a lot better than he's getting credit for, that he is ready to be a starter on the outside. It's that he's going to get tested, and he's going to have to pass those tests. So what he shows in this next couple weeks is going to be really important in terms of how the Saints view that position. Do they need to wait, on cutdown day when all these names hit the waiver wire? Are they going to have to pounce and go after, some of the top names that inevitably get cut? Or do they feel comfortable with Ken Crawley and Paulson Adebo coming in after him? Paulson Adebo, I thought, when you're a rookie player and you can tackle in the open field, you're going to earn playing time real quick because those are the plays that, leave an impression. He's not going to get asked to play a lot of one-on-one coverage on the outside. He's not going to get put on an island as a rookie most of the time, but he will in the preseason. So what he can show there is really important, and he did have a really good day against Baltimore. The Saints lost that game, but I think the defense had a lot to walk away from and look back on with positivity. The offense in the second half, not so much, and the turnovers, not so much. But the defense, I thought, played incredibly well up and down the roster. A guy like Andrew Dowell, who just keeps showing up. Zach Bond had another big week. And these are guys who, they're fighting for the roster. I think Zach Bond is pretty safe. Andrew Dowell might have a bit more trouble cracking the end of that linebacker depth chart, but I still think he's going to be in there. And all these guys are going to have to show off today. Keep in mind, it's a short week, so the Saints have to cut down to 80 on Tuesday, and then they have to basically figure out what they're going to do for Arizona, and then cut down to 53 the next Tuesday. There is not a lot of time to do more evaluation. What you see in this game is going to determine a lot of these roster battles, and that's at wide receiver. With a guy like Kevin White, who just showed up and has to show off. Jeff Heath just got signed. He's got to show something. They have to cut 5 players before Tuesday, before 4 p.m. on Tuesday. Can Jeff Heath show enough today if he's active to maintain that spot? Who knows? He's a guy that you should watch, though. And so let's keep going. I think the title of the video says, "Will it be decided today?" And, that's kind of alluding to what was reported by Peter King earlier today, maybe last night if we're being technical, which is that Sean Payton is hoping to make his quarterback decision, his ultimate quarterback decision, who the starter is, before the final preseason game against the Cardinals. Now, he's not committing to that. He told our own Mike Hoss yesterday that, sooner or later, with later being obviously before week 1 against the Packers. But let's see, I have that queued up here.
Irrespective of who wins this quarterback battle, will you have enough after this game? Will you have enough body of work, do you think, to make a decision?
Well, look, you're always, as a coach, you're wanting as much as possible. And you're wanting to evaluate everything. And our job is to find, the right 53 for the roster, the right set of players for the practice squad, and then with that, putting these guys in their best positions to be successful. So back to the question of quarterback, we're constantly paying attention. Hey, are these things that these guys do well? Sooner or later, we're going to have to make a decision, and then we'll kind of go from there.
This is a curiosity question. What's wrong with later for you? I mean, what advantage is it for you to name your starter prior to
sooner or later? It just later is before we play Green Bay. Yeah, that's right. So there's no I don't feel like, hey, it's time to make the announcement, because we're not there yet. We're still trying to complete the process.
Sorry, I was muted there. My bad. Anyway, tracking back to before I wasn't muted. My bad. So I think what you heard there is the Saints aren't committing to definitely making that decision this week, but I think they really want to. And what might delay that decision wouldn't be good quarterback play, right? If guys come out and light it up, I think that helps you make that decision. If both guys come out and really struggle today, or one guy comes out and really struggles today, those are two very different things, because if they're both struggling, then you just need more time. You need more information, because if you can't decide who your franchise quarterback is, then that's a problem. And keep in mind, you're not only deciding who's going to start this year. The decision is far beyond who is going to win you more games this year. It's who do you think is going to win you a Super Bowl, right? One of these quarterbacks might help you be more competitive this year, but if neither of them you believe is your franchise quarterback, then that changes the equation entirely. So I think that there's a lot to figure out today. And obviously, if one of these quarterbacks really struggles, if one of them throws a couple interceptions, just can't get the offense moving, there's a lot of procedural penalties. People are lining up out of position, making more incorrect reads, as Taysom and Ty did last week for that interception. And, that could make the decision a lot easier. But I do expect to see some of these concepts from last week come back. Taysom talked this week about how That was a missed read. You're talking about a zone man read where the running back or wide receiver, in this case, because Ty is a wide receiver now, will continue on against man-to-man coverage. He'll sit against zone coverage. Now, there are more complex reads than this, and you could argue that he could have kept going and that would have been the correct read. But one way or another, they have to get that sorted out and at the very least be on the same page. If they're both making the quote-unquote wrong read, that still works as long as they both make it. And that's the important thing, is chemistry and being on the same page. Taysom said that they sorted it out. They had a drill specifically to work on that read in practice this week. And I would be shocked if you don't see at least one set with Ty Montgomery on a crossing route trying to make that read, and he's the primary target just to get that nailed out. I think you're going to see Jameis Winston target Lil Jordan Humphrey on another fade, see if the ball can be delivered a little higher so that Jordan can go up and use that size. And little Jordan has got to use his hands and show that his hands are much better than what he has shown over the last few weeks. Being at practice, there have been a lot of drops, too many drops for a guy who is fighting to make that roster. And for a guy who needs to be able to make contested catches to have a spot on this roster. When you're 6'4", you need to be able to go up and battle people. You need to be able to use your body and box out almost like a basketball player, because those are the type of catches that you're going to have to make. If you can run away from somebody, great. But when you're 6'4" and you don't have burner speed, you're going to have a hard time doing that. And your role is going to be make contested catches, go up and get the ball. And that's what he's got to do. So I expect to see him get worked into a deep ball again today and see what happens. Let's go. I thought I saw somebody ask about Kevin White. Yes. Do we think the Kevin White ad has anything to do with Traquan? I mean, I think no, not specifically Kevin White, right? I think you add a wide receiver knowing that you could have depth issues if Trey is not healthy. I don't think that adding Kevin White specifically was done because, he can do a lot of the same things Trey can. I don't think that was the reasoning, but I do think that knowing that you are going into a season without Michael Thomas, Deontay Harris could and likely will be suspended over his offseason DUI arrest or alleged DUI arrest. And then obviously you have Trey now, who, whether you feel like his injury is long-term or is just something that's nagging and he'll get back from, you have to at least plan for the eventuality that he might be out for some time at the start of the regular season. So you add Kevin White, you add a veteran, and he's at the top of the list. They worked out a few guys, and he was the guy. I'm kind of half answering your question and half not answering your question, but at the same time, it doesn't matter why he was added. He has a chance to make this roster, and today's going to be one of those chances. Can he show something this week that justifies giving him that roster spot and locking up one of those spots to see what he can do when the games count, when the regular season starts? I don't know. I've seen a bit from him in practice. He caught a couple touchdowns, nothing super electrifying. He made a nice play on a deep ball that thrown by Taysom Hill that was a little behind him, and he worked back to it, and he forced a defensive pass interference call on Natrell Jamerson in coverage this week. So that's the type of thing that he can do. And, without Trey, if Trey does miss time, he is a guy that you could see slotting in at the Z and, giving people some trouble downfield. He was the number 7 pick in the 2015 draft. He has a lot of hype. He has a lot of talent. He has a lot of athleticism. Just hasn't been able to put that and health together at the same time. He hasn't been able to mesh health and opportunity. Who knows? He's a guy who's very confident. His first day at practice, he won a rep in one-on-ones and high-stepped into the end zone. CD Deuce was not thrilled. But, hey, he earned it. He got to celebrate. And he's a guy who is competitive, wants to be out there. He says not about money. It's about, taking advantage of his talent. And I think that's the right approach. And if that approach is indicative of, how he's able to play, maybe the Saints find another diamond in the rough, or maybe he's gone on Tuesday, right? Because the question is, would you rather have Kevin White or cut, one of these young wide receivers who you've brought in and have been building up? Would you rather keep Kevin White or Lil Jordan Humphrey if that's the decision? Would you rather meet Kevin White or Chris Hogan if that's the decision? And those are the type of decisions you're going to have to make because you can only keep so many. If Trey goes to IR, that opens up a spot. If Deontay Harris gets suspended to start the season, that opens up a spot. But as of right now, I don't have him on my final roster, but he can change that today. All right. Let's get a couple more in here. I think Johnson has a killer day with Winston. I think that Juwan Johnson showed what he needed to show last week in terms of, does he have a spot on this roster? And I think he showed, yes, he has a spot on this roster. So I don't necessarily need to see him today, because what I saw last week is exactly what I needed to see. He's a guy that can bust the seam. He's a guy that can make it hurt downfield. And I think the Saints want to see Troutman today. I think the Saints want to see what the other tight ends have to offer. Troutman didn't catch a ball. He's a guy who has a lot of hype around him. He had reportedly had off-season surgery because he had an issue with his appendix. So that was kind of slowed up his beginning to camp. But there's a lot of expectations there. And I think the Saints are going to want to see what Adam Troutman has to offer with the quarterbacks, because that's going to be an important factor. I wouldn't be surprised if Juwan doesn't get a ton of run today, doesn't get a ton of deep targets. They might want to see him blocking and get Troutman downfield. So I don't think you're going to see a ton from Juwan today, because, like I said, he's not a guy who needs to prove it. But he is a guy that probably would be active next week. Right, so you're going to get those reps either way, and I think that the Saints might want to give Troutman a week off, an extra week off. So I would expect to see a lot more Troutman today. Any news on LataGoat? Great nickname, first off, LataGoat. And no, to keep it simple, we have not heard anything from the NFL. Marshawn, when we talked to him, said he hasn't heard anything. Sean, when we talked to him, says he hasn't heard anything. And I think the longer you go without hearing any discipline news, the more likely it gets that we get through this season before having to worry about it, which is a win for the Saints in terms of not having to worry about yet one more roster spot. It could still come down, but I don't think the NFL is in the business of taking star players out of games a week before they're supposed to happen, right? It's not like anything's going to change if they weren't going to wait for the case to litigate for the litigation to play out in court. They could have put down a suspension a month ago, right? 2 months ago even. That wasn't the case. I don't know why you would wait until a week before the season to send down a suspension, unless you're waiting to see how the case proceeds in court, right? So that's my take on kind of what I've seen from this timeline. Now, Deontay Harris, on the other hand, has a much more straightforward situation. It's a DUI arrest, and there's kind of a precedent been set for what the penalty will be. When Willie Snead got arrested for a DUI, he had a 3-game suspension, which was appealed down from 4. When PJ Williams got arrested for DUI a few years ago, he got a 2-game suspension, and I think that's what you're going to end up seeing. I would be very surprised if Deontay Harris didn't get handed at least a 2-game suspension. I would not be surprised. I don't know why I phrased it that way. It's the most confusing way possible. I wouldn't be surprised if Deontay Harris gets a 2-game suspension to start the year, and I wouldn't be surprised if Marshawn Lattimore does not get a suspension to start this season, but does get one to start next season. Because at that point, things will have played out, and the NFL will be able to levy punishment in a way that kind of weighs all the facts. And the kind of gray area is, does the case kind of finish out in the middle of the season, and then they levy suspension in the middle of the season? Who knows? But at this point, I feel like you've gotten pretty far into the preseason, and there might be some confidence there to be like, okay, maybe we have actually got some positive player availability news for once. But that's just my take. Suspension could come down this afternoon. No way to know. Darius with the Adam Troutman take, and I've been kind of vacillating on this for a few weeks now, watching him in camp, kind of watching what he does. And, I think that that there's always going to be hype around a Saints tight end because of what they have done in the past with their tight ends, what they have shown can be done in this system with athletic tight ends. My question about Troutman is, is he that hyper-athletic tight end? Is he? I mean, it's not a bad. You can be a very good tight end without being, crazy super Rob Gronkowski, Jimmy Graham, Zach Ertz, Travis Kelce type athletes. I'm just not sure he's that. But I think he is a very good tight end, and I think he's a very good blocker, and he's a guy who you can rely on in key situations. I just don't know if he's a guy who's going to be able to attack the defense down the field, if he's going to stretch the seam the way a guy like Juwan Johnson can. And, you know, I've kind of landed on the point of I think he's kind of a supercharged Josh Hill. You know, like Josh Hill was an excellent tight end. He's not an excellent pass catcher, right? But he was a guy who stuck around for, I want to say, 7 seasons. The Saints used him a ton, and he was an important player. You know, so what you have in Troutman is a guy who can block similar to how Josh Hill did, but he's also more of a weapon in the passing game. While he might not be the athlete of a Jared Cook, he can get in these intermediate routes, and he can make it hurt, and he can get downfield in instances where, you know, the defense is forcing him to do it, and I think he can take advantage of them. But I think that the anticipation for this monster season for him will be left wanting. I just don't see him being a 1,000-yard receiver. I just don't. You know, I think he's a guy who could eat in the red zone. I think he could get 8, 9, 10 touchdowns under certain circumstances if the Saints put themselves in position to score often. But I agree, Darius, to some extent. I think that for a second-year tight end who, you know, was good last year but hasn't shown that pass-catching ability quite yet, I think the hype is a little overblown. Luke, you can do whatever you want. It's the preseason. And plus, you know, it depends what that other stuff is. All right. Let's see. Okay, Ricardo, last take. Jimmy Graham is the standard. It'll be difficult to reach it with anyone else. And I agree with that. The difficulty is, you know, you have to have comparisons somewhere. It's a system, so you're trying to figure out how someone fits into the system. And you don't want to be compared to Kobe Fleener, right? You don't want to be compared to a guy like Michael Humanamanui. I think I said that right. Not because he's anything to do with him as a player. He just wasn't healthy. And you don't want to be the guy who just can't get healthy. You know, Jared Cook had his moments, but, you know, he had his struggles. As we remember, the fumble. He fumbled in both. He fumbled in the second game against the Bucs, and he fumbled in the playoffs against the Bucs. Both were brutal. The game in Tampa didn't end up hurting them because they won 38-3. But it was still a bad fumble at the time. I remember saying, man, if they lose this game, you're going to look back at that. And so, you know, there's a lot of reasons you don't want to be compared to people. But, you know, I like Troutman a lot. I think he's going to be a good player. I think when you get excited about him, it's the fantasy football aspect of it. And I just don't know if he's going to deliver in that sense. But I think he's still going to be good. Okay. Quan. Yeah, I'd say he does. I assume you're saying Quan and not Koan. They're close. But yeah, I think Quan is the starting will linebacker, and it's just a matter of whether he is ready to play week 1. But if he is healthy, he's going to get in there. But okay, I think that's it for me. Make sure you check out WWL AM 870 FM 105.3 pregame going on right now with Bobby Hebert and Christian Garrick. Make sure to tune in for the broadcast. Mike Haas, voice of the Saints, and Deuce McAllister taking over starting at 7, well, a little before 7, with the game kicking off at 7 over on ESPN Monday Night Football. Again, my name is Jeff Nowak, WWL's and Audacy Sports digital sports producer. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow WWL on Twitter at WWLAMFM. Make sure, you know, hit me up if there's anything you want to see in these live chats, if you have any comments, questions, anything like that, and I'll try to get back to you. DMs are open on Twitter. Thanks for everyone who chimed in, everyone who left a comment, question, snarky remark. I love it. I'm going to head over to the Dome now, get out of the studio. I might walk. It's about 1,000 degrees out there, but I don't feel like driving. So we'll see. If you see a overly sweaty guy in the press box, it's because I walked to the Superdome, and it was a bad decision. But we'll see what happens. Got about a little over 90 minutes till game time. Thanks again for tuning in, and make sure to check out audacy.com/WWL for more pregame content, a lot of which written by yours truly, Jeff, right here. All right, y'all. Thanks. Bye.